Hi everyone, I'm the plant propagator and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk with you about propagation of polka dot plant right here. And I just want to, before we get into propagation of this plant, I want to tell you a little bit about my background. So for 35 years, I ran a tissue culture laboratory, a propagation laboratory at a major university in the Midwest US. I have a PhD in plant physiology, and I've learned a lot about how plants grow, how they respond to plant hormones and growth regulators, and I did propagation of many different plants. I focused, it's interesting, I focused for most of my career on soybeans and corn because I was in the Midwest, but I also worked on wheat, rice, sunflower, garlic, Chinese yam, a large number, pine, a large number of different plants. And what you find out is that when you're looking at basic processes like propagation, they're similar across not all, but many different plants. So I became familiar with propagation, not of all plants, they're close to all plants, and I've applied it to a number of different plants that I currently work with. I retired to Southwest Florida about 3 years ago, and the advantage here is that I can garden and propagate plants year-round. I used to have a column that I would write for the local gardening newspaper, the Arboretum newspaper, where I was the thrifty gardener. And it's because what I like to do is propagate plants. I'll go out and I'll buy a plant, or a plant will be gifted to me, and then I'll make lots of copies of that plant for free. And for me, it's because I'm thrifty, but also because I understand how propagation works. You can do this, and so you can get a lot of plants for free if you know how to propagate. The other thing is, what I tend to do is I tend to go to the gardening stores, the big box stores and the gardening stores, and I'll buy like a single plant, and I want to see how it does. I want to see how it grows in my local environment here, and if it does well, I'll continue to propagate it. So it's really nice to be able to do that. You know, you don't want to go out and buy a dozen or 2 dozen plants, put them in the ground, and then they all die, and it's like, oops, what did I do? But I like picking up different plants. I like experimenting. My background is as a scientist. I like experimenting with different plants, and I like to see how things do in various locations, you know, in my yard. And I have a small growing space right now, so I get stuck when I propagate plants, because you get to the point where when you know there's just no room for all the plants that you're able to generate. Okay, so let's get to the polka dot plant here. So I bought, a few months ago, I bought a single plant of this. This is bad. It was on sale for $1 at one of the big box stores. I'd never grown it before, and I don't even know the scientific name for this plant. It doesn't matter, it's the polka dot plant. It has on the leaves, they come in, there's different forms that you can get of this plant. The form that I have has, the leaves are mostly green, and there are pink polka dots, but I've seen them with, you know, with red and some, you know, maybe some darker colors in there. I've seen a lot of different forms of this plant, and they're very similar as far as how you propagate them and how you grow them. They're a tropical plant, so they like this environment here that we have in Southwest Florida, but they like shade. So when I planted my plant, shown here, it grew really well when the sun was low in the sky, but then as we're getting now to summer, the sun is higher in the sky and it's getting a little bit too much light, and what happens, I think, is it got stressed a little bit and it started flowering. So these things, the flowers on these are not very attractive. It has small purple flowers, and they're known mostly for the polka dots on the leaves. And it's a nice plant, but I think because it was getting too much sun, that it started to flower and which is undesirable. And then they get leggy and they don't look as nice. So when they flower, if they flower too early, you can keep on pinching off the flowers and it'll continue to grow vegetatively. So this plant, though, it does flower normally under short day conditions. We don't have that here now. So I think it was a little bit because of the higher light intensity and because maybe the higher temperature also, that this started flowering. But the plant, it's still doing okay. It's growing nicely, but it's flowering, which is undesirable. You want a good bushy vegetative plant. All right, how you propagate this plant? Well, this plant is propagated really similar to a lot of the other plants that I propagate in my growing space. What I have here is coleus. Coleus is propagated the same way, and essentially what you do is you take cuttings, and you take the cuttings and you dip the base of the cuttings in a rooting powder that contains a plant hormone, a plant growth regulator. The plant growth regulator stimulates root induction, it inhibits root development, but that's okay. And then over time, under high humidity conditions, that plant, that cutting, will grow roots and it'll do nicely. The thing to remember is that when you make cuttings of many plants, first of all, you make cuttings, put them in water right away here. And the other thing is that when you propagate, you have to maintain things usually under very high humidity conditions. You should remove the majority of the leaves on your cutting because the leaves create a surface area for evaporation. It's a cutting, it doesn't have any roots, so you want to remove the majority of the leaves so that the water isn't evaporating from the leaves and the plant will do a little bit better. You want to maintain these things, again, under high humidity conditions. Okay, so let's get going on propagation of the polka dot plant. The first thing, and there's different ways to do this, I prefer to propagate in soilless, or actually a soilless mix. Some people use water, but when you use water, you can get roots to form in water, and you still have to put those rooted cuttings in soil anyway. So I just prefer to do things directly in soil, and it works fine like that. The soil that I use is a good quality soil from Miracle-Gro. So I use Miracle-Gro moisture control potting mix, and it's a little bit more expensive than some of the other potting mixes that you might know and might use, but this is good stuff. This potting mix, you have to worry a little bit about mold and fungal growth in here. You don't want to rot your cuttings, and this is a good mix for that. It tends to be, I tend not to get too much fungal growth and dying of my cuttings when I use this potting mix. This is a soilless mix. It contains all synthetics. Moisture control means that it has some particles in there that absorb moisture when the water is plentiful, and then if it gets dry, it releases it. So it's a good mix to use if you have conditions. For example, here the soil is really sandy, and it contains a nice nucleus of a moisture control medium, so that it'll absorb the water when it's there and it'll release the water when it's a little bit dry. So I like using this Miracle-Gro moisture control potting mix for all of my cuttings, and it works really well. So what you do is you put the soilless mix into pots, and I have these are just 4-inch pots. You can use anything that you want. This comes a little bit moist, but I always like to add a little water and get it, initially at least, really wet. You can't overwater. This is a good mix. You can't overwater it. It drains out nicely. It's airy, and then if it does get too dry, it releases the water from the components here. It releases the water into the soil and into the plant. So it's just really a great mix. So this is our moisture control potting mix. It's moist. It's pretty wet now. And what I'll do, we'll take our cuttings, and I'll show you how you prepare those in a second. And then I'm going to poke, at least right now, I'm going to put 3 holes for 3 cuttings in this pot, in this container. Okay, so there's 3 in there, and then I'm going to put 3 in here as well. Okay, so now now these things are ready to go. The cuttings that I'm using are right here, and these are, this has a lot of small leaves on it. You want to make sure that you have a number of nodes that are underneath the soil, and the nodes is where the leaves attach to the main stem. So I'm gonna pick off those leaves, and so that there's a good area that that is just a bare stem. I'm also going to cut off, and these leaves are small, so depending on how big the cutting is, you want to minimize the amount of surface area of leaves. But because these leaves are so small, I'm going to leave 3 to 4 leaves on each cutting. So this is wet. This was in water, and I'm going to take this and then dip this into, this is garden safe take root, and you can get this at any big box store. You can get it at Amazon if you like, but this contains a hormone, a rooting powder. In the rooting powder, it contains indobutyric acid, which is an auxin, and this auxin induces root formation, and it does inhibit root development. But the main thing is you're trying to get root formation, and this degrades quickly. So over time, this will degrade, and then the roots will grow. It's mostly just the powder. There's no, this is not straight indobutyric acid or IBA. It's mostly just the powder. In the old days, they used to put a fungicide in there. They don't do that anymore. I contacted the people at Garden Safe, and they say there's no fungicide in there. There's just this plant hormone and the inert ingredients, the powder. This is a white powder, so what you do is you dip this in there, you knock the spare powder off, and so what you have is the base of this cutting that was wet, that is now the water made it so the powder sticks to it, and so you shake the excess off, and then you can place this in the soil. So I'm going to do the same thing again here. I'm going to remove, let's do this, same thing, three leaves, and then I'm going to leave, yikes, and I'm going to leave 3 leaves on this. I'm going to dip it in here, shake off the most of the rooting powder, and shove it down in here. And I'll do one more when I'm talking with you, and then we'll move on. Okay, so we've got 3 leaves on here. I made a mistake. So I've got my trimmers here, and I'm trying to just pinch it off, and what happened is I pinched off all with 2 leaves, and it's okay, but if you have some of these cuttings that are kind of tough, it's a good idea to use your trimmers to cut those off. So what I'm going to do is, I only have 2 more. I'm going to do 2 more, and I'm going to go through this really quickly so you can see how I do it, but it's the same thing over and over again. Okay, so I did the last 2, and what I found out is my last one, the leaves are a little bit bigger. Again, if your leaves are bigger, if you're doing cutting of something like coleus or large, and you can use this same approach for propagation of a number of different plants, but if you have something like coleus or a larger leaf plant, you can leave 1 or maybe 2 leaves on there. So here I had a little bit of a larger leaves on some of these, and I left just 2 leaves on. Again, you want to minimize the amount of surface area for water evaporation, because these guys don't have any roots on the plants yet. All right, so we have these two pots that have cuttings, and what I do, the next step is to water them again, and you want to get the soil to kind of collapse around where the stem was. So these are ready to go. In Southwest Florida here, it's very, very high humidity. It's high temperature and high humidity. So I'm going to have these plants. I have a nice shady spot that I'm going to put these plants. But you can put them in a shady place. Do not put a plant that you're trying to propagate usually in direct sun. It doesn't work. You want it shade. Again, you're trying to minimize the evaporation of the water from the leaves. The process is called transpiration, by the way. So you want to minimize that. So you want to keep these things in shade. And again, in Southwest Florida, with the high humidity that we have here, I just leave these right out in my garden. If you're someplace dry, or if you're doing this in your house, what you can do is take just a bag, just like this, or any bag, and you put it over the top of the pot, and you can attach a rubber band around the outside of the pot, and then you can essentially just blow this up. Let me get this connected. All right, so you can create essentially a mini greenhouse like this. If you have this, again, inside, in many of the temperate areas, these are, polka dot plant is a house plant. So they grow nice in that condition, but here, tropical plant, grow it outside. So if you're in an area, you can either put this in a tub, in a container, or just put something on top of this, and this is going to maintain very high humidity. You want to keep it like this under high humidity conditions for at least two weeks, but you can do this as long as 4 weeks. And what happens over time, this is not going to work here, too windy today. What happens over time is you'll get root formation on your cuttings. So these were done about a month ago. And what's happened is they continued, they're not quite the kind of growth that I want. One of these is, but most of these they continue they're in a flowering mode. And so I've got to trim these guys back to try to get them to go vegetative. But what I want to do is show you what this looks like. And because I started out with this, and I now have this, there's growth. So, we're going to take a look at the roots, but it's not necessary, because when you get this amount of growth, when you get this much growth, this thing's rooted, and these plants are doing really well. So if we take a look at them, we can take a look at them like this, and the bottom, I'm surprised. There's just mass of roots right here. This plant is even growing, these plants are even growing better. And what you can probably see, it's the same thing. There's just a mass of roots on the bottom of this pot. So these guys are certainly ready to go. I'm going to try planting these, because this is what I do. Try planting these in different locations. I'm going to put maybe one over here, shady conditions, maybe one over there, again, some other shady conditions. And I can see under what conditions these things will thrive and do best. Before I do that, again, what I need to do is just trim these guys up a little bit and try to promote where I'm going to try to promote a little bit more of vegetative growth. But, polka dot plant, very easy to propagate, really easy to do, as it is with most plants. You can make as many of these plants as you want. Try growing them in different locations, and just have fun, because it's what I like to do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my video today on propagation of polka dot plant. If you enjoyed it and you want to keep on seeing my videos, it would help me out if you can click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right, that's all I have for today. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and happy propagating.